Hey everyone, welcome back to the White Coat Club. My name is Lindsay and I am a counselor here at Moon Prep. And today I have Michaela with me, and we're going to be talking all about how to pick a major for college. Before we get started, though, don't forget to like and subscribe to get more BSMD and med school admission advice.
Hi,
I think,
everyone. It's good to meet you, see you again. I've been on
yeah,
a few of these podcast episodes, and it's good to be back.
yeah, it's been a little bit, so it is good to hear you and get your opinion about major selection because I feel like with our even our younger students start to get into this, and with our juniors and seniors, definitely getting into this. And so, how do you advise kids to pick their major?
Most of the time, students come to me and they have a good idea of what they want to go into already, just from talking to friends and family or even targeting their certain schools. But a few times out of the year, students will come and they have no idea, and so we have to start from scratch, or they come with an idea of something that I actually suggest that they should change. So a few times a year, we get to do some major exploration together. And it's always really fun. I think I've said this in previous episodes, but I used to work for a state university in their admissions department. And so I kind of handled some requests or, kind of advice from incoming students on what major like they should choose, or I was always asked a lot of questions about different majors and departments. And so it's kind of fun to be on the other side and help students pick a major. But I think for me, and we can go into this in more discussion, I always like to dive into their resume and see what kind of a theme is being created from their resume to try to pick out what they might like to be, do as a career, or see if that theme that's being created across two or three resume items, if that points to an interest, if they haven't already identified that. So that's kind of like one place that I start if they have no idea is looking at their resume, seeing what activities they have been drawn to.
hmm I love that. And I think even if you're younger, like a freshman, sophomore, that can be stuff you're starting to think about with your summer programs and things like that. You could be doing more like a psychology focused program or more of like a biotech type summer program. And those types of things definitely could shape where your potential interests are at. And so, yeah, I completely agree. Resume building, kind of what your personal brand that you're building, that you're kind of building throughout this process and kind of selling to schools will shape what your major selection might be. I think like shadowing too can be really helpful. Pre-med is not a major. I feel like we kind of hear that a lot too about, oh, I'm going to major in pre-med. That's more of a pathway, not really a major at most schools. I think occasionally I'll see it, but shadowing and like doing those types of things can really help and make sure that you are liking the particular field. Just because you like biology in high school doesn't mean you actually like it in action whenever you kind of see it in the research lab or whatever it might be. So getting some like hands-on experience can help too. Usually when I am starting with like a younger student about which major to pick, we do take a look at what kind of classes they like and what their career goals are going to be. So just because you want to be a doctor does not mean that you have to major in biology either. That's definitely not necessary. It is like I always tell kids it's kind of like the path of like least resistance to where you need to go because it has like all the requirements you need for medical school. But I've had so many pre-med kids go in many different directions. So if like biology is not your thing, it's okay not to major in biology. Or if you really like chemistry or you want to kind of blend it with biochem. So take a look at your classes and kind of see, okay, these are the themes that I'm really enjoying, and these are the things that I'm not enjoying at all too.
I think it's great to look at your classes, especially because if you are really excelling in a certain area, like let's say you're a senior and you're about to take Calc 3 when most students never get that high at all, it's always nice to identify that as a strength and then see how that can help move you towards your career goals. So, I did this with one of my favorite little students last year. We really looked from the top down. He wanted to go into medical school. He did not want to do a BSMD. He wanted to do a traditional undergrad instead. We were looking, of course, at majors that would help him apply to medical school later. And that's exactly what we did. We looked at his classes, we looked at his resume, and he had originally just chosen, okay, I'm just going to apply for biology at every school. But looking into his resume, looking into his classes, he had gotten way up there in chemistry. He had taken multiple chemistry classes, even taking classes at his local university, like dual credit, when he exhausted all the classes at his school. And then looking at his resume, he had multiple chemistry research and like a science Olympiad project that was chemistry related. He's had like three or four things that pointed more towards chemistry than biology. And so we identified that fairly early in his junior year and were able to do a little bit more resume building towards chemistry. But he went into the entire major discussion thinking, I just have to choose biology because I want to go to med school later. But so many things pointed towards chemistry. And he is happily at Duke right now, doing pre-med in his chemistry major there and loving life. But I think that it was really important for us in that case to look at his end goal, which was a doctor, break it down further. Did he want to do a BSMD, which can really sometimes they specify what majors they'll allow you to apply into. And in his case, traditional undergrads. And talking about biology is one of the most competitive majors. Let's think about other options too. And then looking at his resume and his classes to be able to identify chemistry. And of course, it very clearly all worked out. But looking from the top down, starting from the career and then building almost backwards down to your major is really the approach that I do and have been successful with.
Yeah, I think that that is the way. And I had one girl a couple years ago who was like, I really hate biology, but wanted to major in biology because she thought she had to. If you don't like biology, then like why are we subjecting you to like 4 years of horror? Like, you're not going to enjoy your life and you're probably not going to do well because you're not liking your major. So even if you're pre-med, you will have to be taking a lot of biology classes, but it doesn't mean you have to major in biology as well.
I think that brings up another discussion before we go into more too, is just that if we are looking at things from a med school perspective, if we're sitting here, we're a med school and we have 50 spots, we're not going to give all of those 50 spots only to like girls coming from UPitt and only an interest in pediatrics. No, we're going to change things up. We're going to have a finance major coming from a Fordham. We're going to have a public health major coming from UMD. We want a diverse, eclectic, interesting class, not all one thing. And so your major plays into that. Not all 50 seats are only going to go to biology majors from 50 different colleges. It's also
Mhm.
dynamic in majors too.
Yeah. And according to the AAMC, that 59% of applicants have non-traditional majors. So that will be like your humanities or your social sciences. I can't say that. Um, and it really does go ahead and show that having like that different perspective, because exactly what Michaela was saying, if we have 50 students who all study biology, they might look at a problem the same way. But if you have one who studied like psychology and another one who did like bioethics and another one who did journalism, they're going to come looking at medicine, looking at patients, and maybe even research in a completely different way. According to some data too, like there are sometimes higher acceptance rates for like non-STEM majors, indicating that, I think a lot of people think that if you do a STEM major, you have that big advantage, and that if you do a non-STEM, you're at a disadvantage, you're never going to get accepted. But so just because it's not a STEM major doesn't mean that you are not going to get accepted to medical school.
And I wanted to back that data because I actually looked into this last year. This is really funny, but I looked into this last year of people who were submitting resumes to us for medical mentor roles. And I was just kind of interested in how many, traditional STEM majors they were obviously in medical school and they had listed their majors. And so I actually kept track of that. And it was like 50% of them had pursued chemistry or biology or public health or something. And then the other half of them were finance, business, like other majors. And so that was just actual people that, had were in med school. And I was just kind of glancing through resumes. And I found it just interesting, but it completely backs up that data that you were talking about, Lindsay.
Yeah. So even if you're pre-med or pre-dental or pre-health in general, does not mean you have to do a STEM major. So take a look at your strengths. You're going to be in college for like 4 years. You want to make sure you're picking something that you do actually like, that you will thrive in. You'll enjoy learning, so you have a higher GPA because you're going to hopefully try a little bit harder too and absorb the material better. So major selection, I think, is really critical. Maybe something we should have mentioned before too is just because you start doing a major in college does not mean that that is like your major for the whole 4 years. You can switch if you discover, oh, actually, biology is not for me. I think I want to do more of like a public health type thing. You have that flexibility at most schools to change. There might be like an application process, and some majors will definitely be harder to get into than others, but you are not only forced to do your major. You can usually switch around a little bit, but every school will be different.
Yes, absolutely. Rules will vary from university to university. UT Austin, for example, is one of them that is very difficult to switch majors afterwards. They're just undergraduates are limited in their ability to change majors after accepting admission. And then some majors will always be easier to switch into than others.
Yeah,
Um,
like when I was in college, I started off as a business major,
mhm.
and like in the business school and everything, was doing my little business classes, and I hated like every single moment of it. And I switched from business, a very competitive major, the school I was at, to journalism, which is much less competitive.
Yeah.
And I just had to fill like a paperwork online. I think I did it legitimately like the day before classes started one semester because I was just like, I'm so miserable. I know that business is going to be the more economically smart move. I'll be able to get a much better job probably at the end of the day, but ended up switching and literally just had to file paperwork because I was switching from business to journalism. If I was going the opposite way, it'd be a different story. I'd have to go through like a whole application process.
Mhm.
Um, and sometimes if you're just switching from like biology to biochem, that's sometimes like okay, like if it's within the
Yeah.
same school. So just look.
Same here. My husband did mechanical engineering and he had to go through a whole thing. He like was a little bit lower in the, ACT and everything. So
Mhm.
he was like, accepted conditionally. And me over here, English and journalism, just waltzed right in.
Just
So
go right in. Exactly. A little bit easier to
yeah.
do. So yeah, exactly. So it just depends on what you want to get into. And that's what I always kind of caution kids on too. Sometimes they'll be like, oh, well, I'll just go transfer into like the engineering school, like if I change my mind. And it's like, well, it might be really tough to
Mhm.
do that just based on like your grades and based on how much space they have. They might not allow you to do it. So have some caution. You can switch, but not 100%.
Yes. Proceed with caution.
Proceed with
Always
caution.
as easy.
Hmm.
What do you think about going in as undecided?
Ooh, so I know that it is kind of popular with students, but I feel like if you do have like a pretty good idea of what you want to do, I always do think it's a good idea to pick a major. I don't have a ton of kids who go undecided, but I feel like for the most part, we do usually work with kids who are like they have their goal of like becoming a lot of
Mhm.
the times a physician. And so they kind of have like a set plan already in their minds. When I have worked with like non-BSMD students, some of them have gone undecided just because they're not sure and they don't want to be kind of be held to it. But I think it can help make it a little bit easier when you're writing your essays and kind of trying to show to schools who you're going to be and what kind of student you plan to be on campus, what you're going to participate in, that kind of stuff. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to write those why major essays.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
like impossible.
it's impossible. So I think I kind of usually suggest or work with students to pick a major. We work on kind of declaring a major. So I recommend at least trying to decide
Mhm.
on something. It'll just kind of help everything be a little easier.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I think I'm like now thinking back, I've had maybe two
Hmm.
undecided kids like my whole time. I've been
Yeah.
at Moon Prep, so for about 7 years now. It's not very common, but you
Hmm.
know, just you do what's right for you at the end of the day too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know how, at your school, Michaela, but how much did you use the major choice in your guys' decision-making process?
Very little. We were absolutely looking at their transcripts and their essays so much more than their major. I feel like I really only glanced at the major. I mean, it was not a huge consideration. Obviously, I had to double check if people met certain criteria for, they're going into an engineering college that had certain higher criteria than the general school, but no, it was not something that the first thing we looked at or anything like that. We really liked students that did have a cohesive theme. And so, again, like that student that I was talking about, biology versus chemistry, if he would have chosen biology and then we're reviewing his application and seeing all this chemistry stuff, that does raise a red flag about why your essay would have to be very, very strong then to show why biology over all of this kind of theme across your resume for chemistry. So I would say really, I don't recommend just picking something random. You have to be able to kind of tell a story with your resume and your essays. But no, our school really did not factor the intended major into the admissions decision too heavily at all.
And of course, that will kind of vary from place to place.
Yeah.
So you can research it usually and kind of see how much they are taking it into consideration. I have noticed some schools will just admit a student into like the College of Arts and
Yeah.
Sciences or the School of Engineering. So they're not necessarily pitting a
Mhm.
biomedical engineering student versus like a other type of engineering student, electrical engineering, there we go, kind of student, and like that type of thing. So,
Mhm.
you don't have to necessarily split hairs if you're like, okay, biology or biochem, which one do I
Yeah.
pick? It's like, well, they're just admitting you to the general school, so it's okay. You can kind of make those
Mhm.
selections later on. And then some schools make all of their students go in undecided. They
Mhm.
are just admitting them into the school and you declare your major as like a sophomore or things like that. And so
Yep.
every school is always going to be a little bit different.
I do recommend, to really enroll at the university only when you're offered admission to a major in a field that you'd like to study. Don't pick something random just to get into a college that you really want to, um, because you're going to be trying to transfer in. Like, don't only go for a major that's easier at a school you want to go to, just thinking that you can change it later, because if you get
Yes.
stuck or something, then you're in a bad position.
Yes. Like this was a non-BSMD student, but he was a classical studies student,
Mhm.
which is definitely not our traditional student. And I feel like probably we have a lot of kids who aren't super interested in that. But he had like a ton of like activities, kind of what you were talking about before, activities that backed this up. So it wasn't just like a random thing that he picked out of the ground where he was like, oh yeah, this is going to be my ticket into Yale. It was something he had like a demonstrated interest in. So even if it's like a major with a like a lower or I guess a higher acceptance rate into the major, if you don't demonstrate that interest, you are essentially kind of like shooting yourself in the foot a bit, I think, with that.
I absolutely agree. Now, let's kind of switch gears here and talk about mistakes that we've seen students make in the past. On my end, I think one thing that I've seen students do that I would consider kind of a mistake is choosing a major because like parents or friends are pushing a certain major. Really, again, it comes down to what does the story of your application say, not what people are telling you to do. Um, and then also not think again, like going back to the very beginning, not thinking about the long term. Like I don't love it when people are saying, okay, well, I'm good at math, so I'm just going to apply for a mathematics major, calculus major, and they don't think about the career at the end of things. What do
Yes.
you want to do with that?
Yeah.
Do you want to go into research? What's the plan with calculus? So those are the major two things for me that I've seen as mistakes.
I think, yeah, picking it for you because at the end of the day, it's your career, it's your education, it's your life. And so the things that you study in college really do, I think, make a big difference there.
For me, my final recommendations of what to be considering when you're thinking about which major to be applying to colleges with are just to look at your career goals in the long run and work towards those with what you're choosing
Hmm.
and try to get some on the job, like make sure you have spent some time in that field. If you're thinking about working in
Hmm.
finance in the future, definitely move towards trying to shadow someone who's a financial advisor. Get a feel for it before you just choose a major blindly.
Yes, and like your school clubs too will be helpful. Like sometimes I've had kids who do like, future like doctor kind of clubs, and they'll bring in people who will talk about kind of their path to medicine, what major they did, and things like that. And so that can also be like a good insight just to show you that there is no one right path to your chosen career, that, there are a lot of ways to get to where you want to go, a lot of different ways to get to the college you want to go to too. So take some time to attend like different clubs and kind of see a little bit more about like what they're telling you about with your, their own path and their own journey.
Absolutely. And I think doing summer internships, summer programs is a really good way to verify your interest in a field. And if you really feel lost, of course, we are available to talk to you. We also recommend taking career assessments. There's so many of them out there, even apps where you can do, like almost a flashcard, different careers and things like that. I recommend all of just trying to make it turn into a game and play with it or immerse yourself in a field for the summer and feel it out.
Yeah, and keep like an open mind as you're going along with this process. One thing I don't think we talked about is you can choose different, this might sound really obvious, but you can choose different majors at different schools. So at Georgetown, you could be going for biology, and then at University of Rochester, you could be going for like bioethics or public health or whatever you might want to do. So not every school will have the exact same majors everywhere, and not every school, will make you pick a major, maybe just an academic interest, but you can pick different major choices at different places, and then that can kind of hopefully play a role in your decision-making process at the end of the day, as you have more time to kind of see a little bit more about classes and what your education at the school would entail too.
That is such a good point. And that also lends itself to keeping an open mind, knowing that even as you go into applying for these colleges, you'll be picking kind of different sounding things just in between applications too.
Yeah, no one right path to the career in medicine, which I'm assuming a lot of you guys are going towards. And so do some thinking. I mean, I know that I've had kids who've have done journalism for a pre-med path, because I had one girl a few years ago who wanted to be like the next Dr. Fauci. And so she did journalism in a lot of the schools. I've had, as I was kind of saying before, a bioethics kid, and he had a lot of like a bioethics club, and he had done like a summer program related to bioethics too. So it was kind of an interest that had grown over the years as well. And of course, I've had like a million biology and biochem type students, but computer science and psych and sociology, kind of everything. So we've seen it all, and you really can do whatever you want as long as it makes sense within your like personal brand that you're building up. Did we miss anything? Can you think of anything else you want to add?
I cannot. I think we covered almost everything that I try to cover with my students. So I
Yeah.
hope it gives everybody a good starting place.
Yeah, I think that's it for us. This was Lindsay and Michaela from the White Coat Club. If you haven't done so, don't forget to like and subscribe. And we'll be back in a couple weeks with more great BSMD and college admissions content. See you then.